Good morning and welcome to another Veterans Forum program. Today, as we have done in the past, it's something that will probably be very interesting to you and the opportunity to share what was actually done way back when. Today's guest, like the other guys, did his thing, came back and enjoyed life. But that little hiatus is the one we're going to show about and talk about today. Stuart, I'd like you, if you will, to introduce yourself, spell your last name, give us your address right now,
Okay.
date of rank and time of discharge and the branch.
Okay.
All in one.
Last name Bartle, B-A-R-T-L-E, and went in the Army in '43, July 1st, drafted, because everybody got drafted then. Served for almost three years. Got out in April of '46. I had a minor skin thing which kept me in the hospital for a while after at the end, but nothing important. What was I in? I was in the, first of all, when I got drafted, I took some sort of a test. They called it the Army General Classification Test. And I was always good at taking those multiple choice tests. I wasn't any good at any questions, but, and apparently I did pretty well because after 2 months at Keesler Field in the Air Corps basic training, the hottest place in the world, I went into the Army Specialized Training Program, a college program in those days, where you were supposed to become an engineer in 4 years. So I went to the University of Connecticut well, first I was in the University of Mississippi, Faulkner's hangout, and then the Yukon for about 5 months. Then they decided in early '44 that maybe the war was going to be over in 4 years, and they weren't going to need engineers. So we went in we all went in the infantry. Okay.
Let me interrupt right there. You're way ahead of me, if you will. What I'd like to do is to go back and build a little history so that we know.
About me personally?
Yeah.
No.
You,
Okay.
like where were you born? How's your family, brothers and sisters, and that sort of stuff?
Born in New York City. Family been in New York for
When?
several generations. Born in 1924.
Oh, kid.
In November, yeah. And second son, a younger and older brother, and went to school in New York City, elementary school, and they sent me to a boarding school in Connecticut, and which I liked pretty much, but got drafted the minute I got out. Finished there. You couldn't enlist in those days, so. But in '43, the war had been going on for over a year,
oh, yeah.
And I went into this ASTP thing, as I said.
Oh, I'm special training.
Special training, yeah. But I kind of didn't like that much because the school I went to was so far ahead of the basic thing that we had at Yukon. And and I didn't like the patch. I wanted to get in the war. In those days, people wanted to get in the war. And I'd come to New York every weekend on a hitchhike there and listen to Knicks down in the village play jazz, New Orleans jazz, which I was crazy about. Went in the Army, then, as I said, the Keesler Field. Should I go back more?
Yeah, if you would. Where and when were you inducted?
July 1st, 1943.
Where?
In New York City.
Okay. Any particular special place, or was it just a...
It was a gigantic place on Lexington Avenue and 46th Street. Okay. A huge place. You took off all your clothes and you and you came to some place and there was a guy sitting there and he'd say, "What do you want, Army or Navy?" And I didn't want to go in the Navy because although I liked to swim, I didn't want to be in a battleship where everybody died at once. I figured I'd take my chances on the ground.
One at a time, huh?
One at a time, yeah. And so then they went to Patchogue, to that place there whose name I'm blocking on, for 5 days. Took these tests, and then it took a long train with the windows, train ride with the windows blacked out, covered, and so on. It got very secret. I felt important. We were secret.
Yeah, and everybody along the route knew exactly where you're going and when.
Yeah, and we wound up in Keesler Field, Mississippi.
Oh.
2 days, and it wasn't like that wonderful train that Marilyn Monroe was on in the movie. Some like it. Marilyn Monroe's movie. Oh, anyway.
No comprando, señor.
No comprando. Well, I didn't comprando anything either in those days. It was a terrible Mississippi was hot and just wretched, miserable. Then we, as I said, I got pulled out of there to go to this Army special deal, which was okay. I had a good fun. I met at UConn. I met these incredible bunch of terrific people. One guy, Jake Alexander, played the trombone, and there was a guy we called the Fish, who was about 6'5" and had a kind of a. I couldn't figure out whether he was called the Fish because he had a sort of his narrow face, or because he drank so much. I couldn't figure out.
Call him Gills.
Both of the above.
Yeah.
And he taught me about 40 Cornell songs, college songs and so on. And so we had a great time. We got together after the war.
Oh, good.
But then when we went down, when the thing ended, we got sent down to Camp Pickett, Virginia, to join the 78th Division, which had just come off maneuvers. And I got put in K Company, and the Fish got put in L Company, so I didn't see much of them for a long time. And then we did basic training again, and I sang in the Glee Club there. That was great fun.
Oh.
Yeah. For a while, I thought it was going to get me out of combat because I thought we'd put on special training, but that didn't happen.
No way.
The colonel was very fond of male voices. That's all I'll say about that. I don't know. But, we used to go to the girls' schools around there. That was fun. Then we went overseas in September. I don't remember the name of the boat. It was a general class.
43,
general
44.
class boat. Yeah, 44. September 44, October 44.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now, excuse me, but were you in a convoy? Or were
convoy,
you one of these,
gigantic convoy.
Okay, you didn't go to the specials like the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth.
No, we went in a real slow convoy.
Oh, yeah.
And we were I always got seasick. Car sick, seasick, air sick, everything. But fortunately, our company was put on guard duty, so we got to be on deck as opposed to 5 flights below, where I think I was the second from the bottom in a 5-layer boat with bunk beds, and you couldn't turn your face because it was bulging from above. And I remember I was thinking, they got me on the deck. I'm watching for submarines. I mean, so I'm looking for submarines. It's dark. I'm thinking, if I don't see this submarine, we're all going to die, which was insane.
You have that on your conscience.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be there to have that conscience. But then we got to, I think, Southampton or something. Then they put us on a train to a place called Bournemouth. And Bournemouth was on the south coast, and they were ready for Hitler's invasion. So they had barbed wire on the beaches. We couldn't go near the beaches. It was a resort town. We stayed there about 3 weeks. I got one pass to London, and we watched the buzz bombs come over. The buzz bombs, for people who don't remember, those are, more accurately, never heard of them.
Never heard of them, yeah.
Were bombs that started off in Germany, and they weren't rocket propelled. They were just regular propelled things. And when they ran out of gas, they would fall straight down. Yeah. So the deal was, when you heard them coming, you hoped that they kept coming, because if they ever stopped, you had to hit the ground. Yeah. Which was a little funny, because then, in other words, you didn't want it to hit you, you wanted to hit somebody else. So then we finally got together, and we got on a boat and went over to France, landed they transferred us from a boat to a landing craft, but there wasn't anybody Germans waiting for us on the beach. We landed at Le Havre, and around a little before Thanksgiving, and we spent a few rainy days there, and then we went on a 40 and 8 car, the French cars, famous 40 and 8 cars. We meant either you could get 40 men or 8 horses in these things. So in our case, it was 40 men. So that meant 5 rows of 8 men, and so we would line up and sleep, and literally, we could just barely fit 8 men lying sideways on it. I mean, so if one person decided to turn over, everybody had to turn over. And I don't know, when we got up there and got near the front, and we all got out, and on December 12th, actually, and December 12th, we had a call at late in the afternoon or early evening. I guess it was dark. It was dark, of course. And at that point, 9 people got called out, and instead of going into combat the next day, they got transferred to the military police. So he said, why didn't I think of that?
Oh, yeah. Somebody's got to direct traffic.
So the next day we attacked like pre-dawn.
Okay. Where specifically, if you can, you know, would?
Yeah, well, it was
in France, Germany,
no,
Belgium,
it was just across the Belgian line in Germany, near Aachen, but not Aachen. It's a tiny little town that nobody ever heard of, called Rolsbroich, and and we walked up a hill on the early morning, and I think it was the 102nd Cavalry Division would walk past us, and we had these brand new uniforms on. Oh, I forgot to say, you had to take one article with you, and mine was a was a catcher's mitt. So when we landed, we threw all our stuff on in a great big pile and never saw them again, of course. But anyway, we all had these new uniforms on, and they came down. They looked bedraggled and tired. We said, "Oh," and they looked at us with disgust.
Oh,
These
yeah.
new guys never had any combat. So that was the snowiest winter that Germany had had in 40 years, and there was snow all over, tremendous amount of snow, and they gave us white sheets, you know,
Oh, the camouflage.
to put us over, and something over your helmet too. So we all charged, and I forget whether they shot a gun off or whatever. Anyway, we all ran down this hill in the snow, which was about as deep as this table here.
Wow.
And with artillery shooting at us and machine guns and so on. But actually, there weren't that many people killed at that moment. It wasn't until we got to the town, which was a tiny town, which the artillery had just blasted. There wasn't much left of it.
And what were you, just a grunt, if you will?
Well, I was a
machine
grunt.
gun, a BA?
I was carrying a mortar.
What was your MOS?
I was carrying a 60mm mortar, man.
Okay.
And I was the gunner, so-called gunner. I was supposed to set the gun up, get the sight ready, and then somebody would put a little thing in.
Boom.
Yeah. There were 4 little explosive things in the end. Depending on your range, you took off 1 or 2 of them or whatever. And so we got there. The main problem was the artillery, but it wasn't the German artillery. It was our own artillery. The cannon company hadn't quite figured out where they were shooting.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, why are these? I'm lying in a sort of a crater, and I'm thinking, why is this coming from that direction? Are we surrounded?
Yeah, euphemistically friendly fire.
Yeah, friendly fire. Yeah, I mean, it took me a while to get over not liking cannon company.
Now, when you said in the crater, did you have to go dig your own hole, or did you have
Well,
some wait for a
not
bomb
then.
blast?
Not then. This was a bomb blast from a previous.
Okay.
And I'm in there. I'm thinking, I had this religious moment, this very opportune religious moment to decide that if God would get me out of here, I'd go to church and be a good person from then on. But he got me out of there. He or she got me out of there. But
Have you lived up to that promise?
no, I'm not. No.
I get you.
Oh, well, actually, my wife's very religious, so I actually go to church pretty often.
Okay.
So then the main problem then was the snow and trench foot and frostbite,
Yeah.
and we wound up in a basement that night. And I remember looking around. Then we were pretty active the next night, and the next night we were in the same basement, no, I guess we weren't, different basement. And we looked around, and one of my buddies had a horrible looking foot, and it turned out he had early trench foot. And a lot of people had frostbite. I had a little frostbite, but not a major case. And it turned out that those people were sent back immediately. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I wish I'd had a little trench foot. And I wouldn't mind losing a foot, you know, as opposed to the rest of me. But anyway, so that was the first combat. We had a lot of guys. Not a lot were killed. A lot were wounded and trench foot and sent back. But 2 or 3 guys in our platoon were killed, and that was sort of the beginning. And that was then a day later. By now we're at the 15th. The 16th was the beginning of the bulge, and the Germans attacked. We were kind of on the north end of the bulge, so we didn't get the frontal assault that the 106th Division did, which was sort of similar to ours, which was full of ASTP people, college kids.
Okay.
And the college kids, we were the low-ranking people. But I should have mentioned that at Camp Pickett, they had this orderly room, and on the walls of the orderly room, they had all the things. Every one of us had a name, and they had all the things we'd done. Had you completed the 25-mile hike? You did this, that, the other thing. And one of them was your score on your so-called IQ. It wasn't really an IQ score, but they called it an IQ score. And you took the people in the AGCT test, the college kids, and we were in the 120s, 130s, 140s, and they were the sergeants who were ahead of us. They were in the 90s. So
rank has its privilege.
Yeah, well, rank, and boy, did they take advantage of it, too.
Why not?
Yeah, and we were regarded as smart but dumb at the same time. So anyway, we didn't get that much of a frontal assault. We were assaulted from the north. There was a whole group of people were coming down to set it. I don't know exactly why, because the big picture was totally lost on anybody as low ranking as we were. I was a PFC then. I mean, I didn't have a clue what the big picture was till the Stars and Stripes came to us a week later. That was the Army newspaper. Mm-hmm. Came to us maybe a week or two later, and we saw this giant arrow, pointing.
That was you.
We were part of the arrow. We were at the point of the arrow, the German arrow.
Oh.
Yeah, wrong arrow.
Now, were you in a position where, as I understand it, Patton came up somewhere?
Patton was way south of us.
Way south of you, but by some miraculous way, he got his troops up there pronto.
Well, that was the legend. Yeah, that was the legend. Yeah.
Okay, is it a legend or is it true?
I don't know, because that's the big picture. I mean, I didn't.
You had your little foxhole.
We just had our little. Yeah, we had our little foxholes, and we had our. And it wasn't so easy to dig foxholes in those days. It got harder as the winter proceeded. The ground got really frozen. And sometimes you had to compromise and only have maybe a 2-inch foxhole.
The belt buckle can't be up that high, too, sometimes.
Yeah. So, but, well, it was what a great bunch of people I was with. I mean, I'm sure everybody that's been in combat has said the same thing. You make the best friends you ever made in your life. And each one of them, I always tear up a little bit about this, but I mean, every one of them would gladly have sacrificed, taken terrific chances to help another person. Any one of them would have. And so, you want to hear the rest of the war thing?
Absolutely. It's your story.
Well,
what you want to share is strictly up to you.
Well, it was. I mean, I'm here still, okay. And we had some tough times. We were supposed to. We had a brief period of quiet, actually, after the bulge. December 25th or 6th, I don't remember, it was Christmas Eve. On Christmas Eve, this is something I'll always remember, we were in a sort of a valley, and the Germans were on the hills to one side, and back of us was some other people, our people. And we heard over the loudspeakers, we heard these terrific American songs, jazz and so on, Christmas carols and so on. And then came a voice saying, "Americans, how would you like to die for Christmas?" You don't have to. All you have to, and then they would there were leaflets that had been flown over, telling you, this is the way you can get out of the war, they said. One of them was putting some GI soap under your arm. That was supposed to give you a fever. Oh. So you could then go back to get on sick call and get out of the war. They gave us all these things. Or else you can just walk toward our lines and, well, we'll welcome you. Otherwise, you may die for Christmas. Yeah. So we all thought that was hilarious. I mean,
now it was, but then probably
no, we thought at the time it was hilarious. Oh? It was just ridiculous, like a PR thing. I mean,
what, Axis Sally or someone like that, or
no, it's just some local guy. Oh. Probably some buck sergeant with a deep voice.
No. You and others have talked about the rough conditions, but is there such thing as a typical day? Say you started up at sunrise, got in line for chow? Was it hot chow, cold chow? Did you have K rations or nothing?
We had K rations. All we had was K rations. The tankers, we didn't see then, but we saw later, had C rations, which were cans and so on. We had the K rations. But what we had, but only for supper, we had the kitchen. And those guys, we worshiped them. They would come up.
The cook-makers.
Well, they didn't get right up to the front, but they got about a mile back of the front. We would walk back, and it was freezing cold, and they had hot food. And to this day, hot soup, hot, thick soup means so much to me. We had these little tin cans, these mess kits, they called it, and they opened up, and you held it with a handle, and they poured stuff into it. And you had a canteen, of course, and that's what they put the soup in. Hot soup, black bean soup, all kinds of wonderful stuff. And phony eggs, I mean.
Powdered eggs.
Powdered eggs, yeah. Yeah, and powdered milk, powdered eggs.
Powdered water.
But it was warm food, and believe me, it was really cold. Once, I guess we'd been up about 5 weeks, and they gave us a day, a night back, and we walked back and got in trucks, and they did one company or one, I don't remember, one platoon at a time or something. We went back to Holland. I guess we were very near Holland at that point. And we went to into this great big room. It was a gym, I think, and they had a whole bunch of hoses set up as showers. And you got under the hose, and you turn on you took off all your clothes. I remember taking off my underwear. We had 7 layers, 7 layers, two full wool underwear.
Okay, long johns.
Long johns. I was trying to think. And they stood up against the wall. They didn't. Oh my God!
Yeah, scraping it off.
Yes. And. Well, that was unbelievably good. And we actually saw civilians on the street, and we felt like we were zombies. Yeah, but that was good. But yeah, so then after 4 or 5 weeks just kind of patrolling and doing stuff like that, we attacked again. And this time, the idea was that there were some dams. There's a river called the Roer, R-O-E-R River, and they had some giant dams. And we were supposed to stop the Germans from blowing the dams up, because if they blew it up, then the whole Ruhr Valley would be, and we wouldn't be able to attack. So we attacked. We went to a town called Schmidt, which had been captured by us twice and recaptured by the Germans, and then this was the 3rd try. So we captured it. And when we were there, I think it's one of the most awful things I remember about the war. There were the frozen bodies of the people that had been there. The Germans never bothered to take the Americans out. So there were these frozen American bodies there from previous people. And I remember, yeah, well, anyway, not a good memory. And because if you lifted them up, and not then, but a little bit later, I spent a day on duty picking up bodies, the frozen bodies. And if you weren't gentle with them, they could break off, which was pretty horrible. But but we didn't quite make the dam. The 2nd Battalion was supposed to be actually in charge of clearing the bomb.
You in reserve?
No, but we were in a different area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so they didn't quite get there in town. The dam blew up, which was okay with me because that meant we get a rest for a while.
PYA.
I mean, the soldiers. We were different from armies. First of all, it wasn't where we lived. We weren't defending anything. We were attacking, and the basic American ideal and the soldier was he wanted to win the war. But he wanted to win the war quick so we could survive. I mean, basically, you wanted to live. Now, some of the Germans were not that way. They were defending their territory. So they were willing to take terrific chances to get killed. We didn't take chances that much. I mean, I guess we did, but we didn't go out of our way to be suicidal. Not like
not kamikazes.
Not like the current war, which I think is a lot harder to go through because I mean, these people want to die to kill you.
And there's no battle line. You don't know who's what and where.
Exactly, yeah. But basically the individual insurgent wants to die to kill you. And the Germans didn't want to die. They wanted to live. They were willing to die, but they didn't want to die. And,
avoid at all costs.
and we didn't want to die, definitely. And, but we were willing to try. We were willing to put ourselves at risk, but nothing suicidal. And sometimes the orders would come down. This is my lifelong aversion to being told what to do. We were often told what to do with the people that weren't very smart. I mean, I'm talking about the IQ test.
Strange you should say that.
And sometimes they'd get these brand new lieutenants. Some of whom were really nice guys, and others whom were just determined to prove that they were a hot shot. I spelled that wrong.
I know.
You know.
You squeeze the O and dot it.
And so sometimes they just tell us to do awfully dumb things, and we did them, but we didn't like the guy that told us. So I don't know. So we stayed there at this river, and we used to go on patrol every night. The only one thing I don't tell war stories generally, but one story I do tell is on patrol one night. I wasn't the leader. I was just fourth or fifth out of 11 or 12 of us. And we passed this tree, and in the tree was a German sniper with his rifle pointing. And there was a fork in the road. And he was pointing toward one of the forks. You know, it's like Yogi Berra. You come to a fork in the road, you take it. Yeah. But, so we followed where his rifle was pointing. So we walked about half an hour more. Son of a gun, we came back, and there he was again.
Going around a circle?
Yeah, so we went around a circle. Apparently, that's what you do if you don't know where you're going. You go in a circle.
And keep bearing to the right.
Yeah, so this time we went down the other road.
Now, was he alive, or was he
No, he was
propped
dead.
up there?
He was dead.
Okay, that's the
Yeah, I
point
should have
wanted
said
to
that.
make.
No, he was dead. He was definitely dead.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have been quite so casual. I was a sniper for a while. I didn't like it. The first place we were at, this Rollsbrough town, I was always, for some unknown reason, because I'm not never shot a rifle very much, but for some reason, I had just the right qualities to make a good sniper. And we shot, but we only had rifles at maybe 300 yards is about it must. But the Germans were on the opposite hill, as I've said before. And I remember getting aimed at some guy who was going in and out of a house, and I shot and he fell down. And that story's always lived with me. I actually shot a guy that never did anything to me, wasn't attacking me or anything like that. So I decided I didn't want to be a sniper. And so the next thing that happened was we charged across the plain. We're now in the Rhine Valley. And we charged across there, and we had a lot of fighting. And it was still cold. It was February. And on March 7th, we captured a town called Euskirchen. I don't think my pronunciation's any good, but we were in a castle.
Oh.
And we were in the cellar of the castle. In the cellar of the castle were hundreds of bottles of wine. So we all got very pleasantly high. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, the sergeant came into our room and woke us all up and said, "Everybody, you know, let's drop your blah blah and pick up your socks."
Everything else, yeah.
And pick up your socks. Yeah, right.
It rhymes.
And they said, "Everybody out." And my buddy was a little smaller than I was too drunk to walk. So I actually picked him up, and I still have the 60 millimeter mortar, and put him on my shoulders, and I walked about 200 yards to the truck with him on my shoulders. I can't believe I had the strength to do that. So anyway, what had happened was, and I was furious, some
person
ass kisser had sorry about that. had actually captured a bridge across the Rhine, the famous Remagen Bridge. And I said, why did he have to do that? We could have gotten a nice rest on the Rhine.
Now you got to go across it.
Now we had to go across it. So we crossed the Rhine, and it was the so-called Ludendorff Bridge. General Ludendorff was a general in the First War, and it was actually a railroad bridge, I guess. But so we crossed on the second day, I think, and walking there was really dramatic. You just felt you were a part of history, even then, because along the road, they had already had their anti-aircraft guns wheel to wheel. Hundreds of anti-aircraft guns that they got there, because what they did not want was the German planes to blow it up. So anyway, we walked there, and then we took a left turn over the bridge, which was kind of, because some of the charges designed to blow the bridge had gone off, but they hadn't blown the bridge up. So every once in a while you'd walk over, not every once in a while, but practically over the whole bridge, there were holes there, and you'd look down, and there was the Rhine down about a couple hundred feet down. Yeah. And so we walked across, and we got halfway across, and some German plane came over and dropped a bomb, and it went right by the bridge, landed in the water, and the bridge went like this. Ooh. You know, and half of us went forward, and half of us went back. And I happened to be on the front part, so I went forward. And I guess the rest of it, from then on, once we got across the bridge, I think it collapsed about 10 days later, and there were a bunch of people were on the bridge when it collapsed. But the Germans were determined. We were called, this was the pocket, and we had a little pocket, and Eisenhower sent all kinds of stuff across that bridge, and then they built pontoon bridges on the second or third day. Was that the Seabees that did that? No, that was the Navy.
That'd be probably the combat engineers.
The combat engineers, yeah. So, so we kept expanding our pocket, and they were to attack us, and that was, and then I don't know. Actually, once we broke out of that pocket, the war was essentially over. The Germans. Well, we just then we had tanks with us for the first time then. And we started racing along through the countryside. And then one magical night, we were in a house, actually. It was, the only time we were actually in a house that wasn't blown up.
With a roof.
Yeah, had a roof, yeah. Yeah, it's an important part of the house.
Amen.
and our artillery did a pretty good job on most of those roofs. And we had a wired radio from headquarters company, and they said, we got a 1 week furlough to London for somebody who's there. I said, anybody that hasn't had any time away yet? And I looked around, and I was the only guy that hadn't had any time there. In fact, I was the only guy that left of the original people by this time, and some of them came back later, the wounded people. So I raised my hand, and I got a 1 week furlough to London.
Wow.
Yeah, which was kind of nice. And then when I came back, it was the day that Roosevelt died, and I couldn't believe that Roosevelt had died, because I mean, he came in 33, and I was 8 years old when he came in, and he'd been my president all my life, and commander-in-chief, and so on. And my family were Democratic, so I mean, he was our god. We loved Roosevelt. So he died, and we had one more attack, and then it was all over, and we went. They took us out of combat. I don't know whether because we were lousy or because we'd lost so many people, because we had lost a lot of people. Maybe, I don't know.
Depot couldn't keep them up.
I have no idea whether our division was any good at all. I know our battalion was. We got a unit citation.
Good.
Yeah, but
also, I remember you said that you got the combat infantry badge.
Well, they just gave you that the first day you got up there.
You had to be around, buddy, for a while.
Well, you had to stay around. No, that was not a big deal.
Okay, it's your story.
No, I mean that's the one I'm the most proud of.
Yeah.
But all you had to do was be there to get it. You didn't have to do anything brave, particularly.
Keep alive.
You had to keep alive. Yeah. Well, yeah.
You don't get them posthumous.
Yeah, then some German would grab it off your body or something. And
where were you when the war ended? Were you on the way to Berlin, or were you just stationed
in Holland? No, the war ended. We were in some country town in Germany, occupying some country town called Martenhagen, and it was a farm town, and after the war ended, then we prepare to go to Japan, so we had training for that. And that was what we call chicken do, because we had basic training. We'd been in combat. We knew how to fight. But we did things like teaching German. I taught German. I had it in high school. And so I taught German. But the only thing people wanted to know was how to meet a girl. Oh. So, wollen Sie spazieren mit mir, Fräulein? Was, will you walk with me, Fräulein? And it was would you schlafen with me? What's the other one? Would you sleep with me, Fräulein? Oh. That had to come later in the conversation. They couldn't do that right away. That's the only thing they wanted to learn. By this time, I was a buck sergeant. Yeah. And then, so we fooled around. We went from there. We went to a town called Kassel, which is a fairly big city, which was a ruin. And then we got sent to Berlin, which we occupied. That was in October, roughly a year after we got to Europe. And we occupied that for 5 months.
Were you in Berlin? Were you stationed in any kind of a hotel or a motel or an R&R depot?
We were in an apartment building, and I was on the 4th floor. And this is where I rebelled against the chicken do, because it was just I was on guard, but I was on guard 1 day out of 8 days, and the rest of the 7 days I played ping pong, and chased girls. And I got busted because I really didn't like anything at all that was going on, and I wanted to just get out of the Army. That's when you had enough points, people with the most points, which meant 5 points for medals, 2 points for every year over every month over, something like that. I don't remember. Anyway, I didn't have enough points. Every month you'd been in the Army, that sort of stuff. So I was really a bad soldier, and I used to report from the 4th floor. At least maybe I only did it once, but I used to. And people were lined up outside at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they say, "First platoon accounted for, second platoon accounted for, third platoon." And I would yell from the 4th floor, "4th platoon present and accounted for." So they decided I was not really worthy to be a sergeant, so I got busted to a private, which is where I wound up.
At least you started there.
Yeah.
Okay, now, when, if you will, everything was over and you started home, how did you make it back home?
Well, we went
Another convoy? Or?
We went no, just an ordinary ship back. And
any memories of that trip
big
back?
Poker games. I lost.
Oh, yeah.
I lost every dollar I got paid. I lost, and somebody was enormously rich on that boat. I don't know. I mean, I went to Fort Dix. I guess it was Fort Dix, and my family came. They lived in New York. They came to see me every weekend. And,
good.
And
now, when you did get back in the Hollywood bit, if you were coming in, did you get the water cannons and all that?
No.
What was the reception like for you?
Well, we were long after the original people had come back.
Okay.
So I guess people were glad to see us. I mean, they were, but.
Yeah. Oh, you? Oh, come on.
Yeah. Where you been? I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah. I missed you at the club.
Oh, no, I tell you one story. I walked down the gangplank on 40 whatever street on the west side, and the Red Cross was there giving out milk. And my mother, who drove for the Red Cross during the war in New York, was giving out the milk, which I thought was kind of interesting. And this is the first real milk we'd had in a couple of years, yeah. And it was the most delicious milk I've ever. I mean, I'm a psychiatrist now, so people say, well, "Your mother's milk was that good?"
Yes, but you got to watch how you put the words together.
Yeah. So
when you got discharged, did you take advantage of the GI Bill, for example?
Yeah. I went to college. I had been accepted to MIT before the war, but when I got out, I said, I don't think I can do MIT. I don't think I'm smart enough. I mean, my brain, I figured, was mush. I mean, I hadn't read a book. I hadn't done anything except numb myself for all that time. So in those days, this is going to sound weird. So I went to Harvard.
Oh.
I mean, it sounds easy, but in those days, I mean, I had a good high school record, and I had good.
Okay.
There was some sort of college board they had, and I had pretty good college board. So I got in, but you know, That was the biggest class Harvard ever had. I mean, I think it might still be the biggest one they had.
Wow. What was your major? Oh, did you have to declare a major?
Yeah, you had to have a major, and I picked English because it was the only one where you didn't have to write an honors. You didn't have to write a
theme paper?
Big theme paper, yeah. So, but this is where the post-war thing began. You said you were going to ask me whether the war was good or bad.
Yeah.
That part was not good because, I mean, we went back and not many people were, I mean, there were a lot of veterans. Maybe a third of the class were veterans.
Mm-hmm.
But I was one of the few veterans that had actually been in the infantry in combat. And it just got to me, and I just felt that nobody else really knew anything about the world. And I mean, they'd just been sort of sailing along in life, and maybe they had fun in the war, and I didn't have any fun at all. So I decided it wasn't interesting, it wasn't worthwhile. So I said, how can this be important is the better word. I didn't think anything I was going to learn was as important as what I'd already learned, which was, of course, totally wrong. So I didn't take any notes in class. I said, I'm not going to take any notes.
Computer?
So consequently, well, no, there was obviously no computer. So consequently, my grades were not too good. But about halfway through college, I decided I was going to have to make a living. My family had been pretty well off. And I just unconsciously thought, maybe I don't have to make a living. They weren't that well off, but I finally realized, you know, I guess I am going to have to make a living. So I said, well, what do I want to do? And I said, well, I want to save humanity. So I said, I'll be a doctor. I mean, I think everybody that wants to be a doctor says they have to do something for humanity. And so I went to the dean and said, Dean, I said, I want to be a doctor. So I want to get in the med track. He shuffled some papers on his desk, and he looked up at me. He said, Bartle, he said, you haven't got a chance.
A warm greeting.
And that turned me on, so I started studying. So I did pretty well. I'm obviously well enough to get into medical schools.
Good.
So I got to medical school. The GI Bill was, of course, good for all of college and then for most of medical school.
Now, in medical school, were you a surgeon, physician,
No.
GP, or
No,
there's gradations that like to get?
It's lucky I'm not a surgeon. A lot of people wouldn't be alive if I was a surgeon.
No problems.
No, just not good with the old hands, except baseball.
Okay.
So, no, I got a residency in Bellevue in medicine, and had 4 years at Bellevue, and wound up as chief resident in medicine. And so I thought I was hot stuff.
Yeah.
And then I went down to got a job and we got a fellowship in cardiology, and then I went down to Virginia, where I was on the faculty there for 8 years. I did cardiac catheterizations and worked with the surgeons and did stuff like that, did research and stuff like that. But I wasn't really any good at it. And finally I decided that what I really was better at was meeting people and so on. So I said, well, I'll take a year of psychiatry residency and see how I do. And I liked it a lot, so I stayed, and I've been in psychiatry since 1967.
Good.
Yeah, and I like it.
So there was that then became the positive view?
Yeah, that was the
A
positive.
more acceptable situation.
Yeah, that was a positive thing. Yeah, but the negative thing was was just nothing. Anything else is important. So it's not worth getting into anything.
Now, being nosy, it's none of my business, I guess, but in your psychiatric practices, did you have the occasion to get to some of the guys back from Vietnam and those places?
Yeah, I did. But basically, they were VA people, so I didn't really get a lot of them.
Okay.
I thought about going to the VA at one point, but the VA then was not what it is today. It was much better today, I think, much stronger today.
Good.
In those days, it really wasn't that. And they always tried to fill up the beds in the ward so they'd keep people forever there, and a lot of the veterans were kind of goofing off, and it just wasn't very inspiring. I mean, I visited the VA hospital. So
It's a good take.
Yeah.
Now, talk about that. Did you ever join anything like the
No, I never did.
VFW, the Legion?
I never did. I never marched on a single parade until 3 or 4 years ago. I decided to march in the Lee Parade. I met up with the Fish from an earlier story, and I said, "Fish, should I?" Actually, he changed his name. He changed his name to John. I said, "John." I said, "Should I march in the parade?" He said, "Sure. What the hell?" So I marched in the Lee Parade, and I wound up marching in the color guard down the streets of Lee, not because of anything except the guy that was running the parade. I put me in a car first, and I couldn't see out the car. So I said, "Can I march?" He said, "Sure, go over there. You know how to handle a gun?" I said, "I think so."
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
and so I'm in the color guard, but I just have civilian uniforms. The other guys have just uniforms on, and I had sneakers on.
Oh, there's that rabble-rouser.
So we'd stop every once in a while and fire 3 shots, and we didn't fire them, but somebody fired 3 shots in the air, and so on.
Well, in addition to the Fish, were there any other guys that you got
there was
way back when that you keep up with now?
Many years later. In fact, only about 6 or 7 years ago, I'm going around the internet. Something said 78th, so I put 78th Division in Google, and it came up there's an organization of people from the 78th Division. So I joined. A lifetime membership was $100 or something. So I joined. And then my name appeared in their quarterly newsletter. And then about 5 guys called me up. And this is like 50 years later, 55 years later.
Have you gotten together?
Yeah, I got together with them finally, especially a guy called Hap in Seymour, Indiana. I went out to see him, actually.
Good.
Yeah. And he was one of the guys that I liked the most. They were all a little bit older than I were, and they were all from southern Indiana or Illinois, and they all knew all those country songs.
Oh, yeah.
I used to know about so many country songs. I know about 4 or 5 now. Went out to see Hap, and his last name was Hazard, so anybody named Hazard nickname was always Hap. So he was Hap.
Did you know Rusty Hazard? He used to work in the paper mills down here.
No, I didn't. No.
Okay,
How come he got named Rusty? They should have been.
Well, and his first name I think was Gerald. I never knew his first name, but he was always called Rusty. His son and my daughter dated for a while, and then young John, as we call him, went off and joined the Navy. Last I heard from his mother about a year ago. I'm finally learning how to compute, if you will. He just retired as a full captain. He was up for admiral, but didn't have enough brownie points to do something.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to get him to come home and do a show with us.
Hazard, yeah. That's a great name.
Oh, yeah.
He had four kids, 5 kids, 4 boys and a girl, and they all live. They're all now in their 40s and 50s. And they all live within a mile of Hap. His wife died a couple.
That's good. That's good.
I thought, he did something right.
Yeah. What about your family? Do you have a bride and some kids?
Got a bride. Married 60 years next on the 23rd. Next month we'll have been married 60 years. Met her in college, and married her in 1949. 4 kids, 2 boys and then twin girls. And they all married and they all have kids. We got 11 grandchildren.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they all like each other, which is
that's the good thing.
Oh, that's the wonderful thing.
That's the best part of having a good crew.
Yeah,
they like each other. They meld.
Oh, when the grandchildren get together, they like nothing better than to play with their cousins.
Yeah.
They ignore the grandparents. Here we are, the foundation, the patriarchs, the matriarchs, and they ignore us.
The old folks.
Yeah. Otherwise, the old folks. What the hell are they up to now?
Yeah. Well, okay. This is your show, but you said something that sparked. One of our grandkids, we only have 10.
You only have 10. Huh?
Yeah, 5 boys and 5 girls. The only models they had. They were home for my 85th birthday last August. And my grandson, who was, I think, 11, going on 65, we were chewing the fat in the back porch. He said, "Grandpa, I now know how I can tell how old people are like you." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, when you ask them a question and they say, 'Well, I once could or I used to,' then they're old like you, huh? Big smacking grin. I could have popped him in the gut. But they did get together, and they have a great time, and it's the best part, because they're, like your kids perhaps, they're all over the country, literally, around coast to coast and border to border.
Yeah. Well, ours are mostly in the East Coast. Three of the kids in Boston with their family and one in New York.
So they're close enough to...
Yes, I see him. Yeah, I see him fairly, not a lot, holidays for sure, but that's about all.
Well, we got to wrap this up a little bit, but in summary, I guess the best way to put it, what's your real feel? Forget the positive and negative, but what advice, if any, would you want to give to some of the guys and gals coming along who may be or may not be good for the service? Is it something you would recommend or not?
I would not recommend it unless it's a situation where there's not a war going on and you can get a college education because of it at the end of it. So I'd say it's an economic choice. Okay. I mean, I don't like military life. I hate calisthenics.
You got a big build.
Yeah. And I don't like guns. I mean, I'm nothing against people that do like them, but I mean, I can't hold a gun.
How'd you feel?
Well, I killed one person once. Okay. I mean, one close-up person once, and I have never gotten over that. I mean, he's in my mind all the time. He looked just like my little brother, and I mean, I don't weep over it or anything. I just feel funny about it.
Always back there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I made up stories. Maybe some guy fired the rifle at the same time I did, you know, next to me. But then I realized, no, I don't think he did. So no, so I don't like guns. But and I think the military teaches you some things. If you're the kind of person that needs discipline, maybe that would be. You can learn how to get yourself organized and how to be disciplined. But I'm not a big fan of discipline. I mean, I'm a shrink.
And you're a rogue. Not a roue.
I don't like being told what to do.
Oh, strange you mentioned that.
I don't find disciplining other people.
Okay.
And, so I've been on, did I ever tell you that I was on television once? Oh, I did tell you.
You did, but tell the folks.
I was in the '38 hurricane movie. Like, PBS decided to make a movie of the
way back then?
No, they made it in the '90s. But
okay.
And I happened to have had an adventure in the '38 hurricane because we were on the beach in Long Island, south coast of Long Island, and the hurricane came along, and we didn't hear the radio warning, so a woman drove up our driveway at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was totally dark at that point, and the wind had been blowing wildly all day, and the ocean was going crazy. And said over the radio, we have to evacuate. We were on a little sort of a spit of sand, and then there was a canal, and then the mainland. And so she picked us all up and took us down the road, and we got down the road, and up ahead of me, I saw this giant water coming toward us. Whoa. And she put the brakes on, and the water went over us. And for a while, we were the whole car was underwater for
a wall of water there,
yeah? Yeah, it was a huge tidal wave came over, and like a tsunami or something like that. But the windows were all shut. There were, I think, 7 of us in the car, including my baby sister and a couple of dogs, and children yelling and screaming and the dog barking.
We're going to die.
But then gradually the water went down the window, and I remember I was sitting on the far left in the back seat. I saw the water go down the window and sort of like this, you know. So we opened the door, and when it got down real low, we walked over to land. But that was pretty exciting.
That's an exciting little bit of it.
So I made television on that.
Okay, so you're a star.
That was my couple of minutes of fame.
Okay, well, you used to have a program here too, I believe, way back when.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah, we used to have a program called Open Mind, which was about mental health issues with Marge Cohan. And maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Okay. Well, you've got something to work on for me if you want as the first patient. I have a lot of little things that got to be put back together selfishly.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Oh?
You got to be worse off than that.
Well, you don't know how bad or good I am, but seriously. Hey, as they say in Swedish, thank you very much for sharing with it, and we thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, too.
Amen. Now, that's a wrap up, folks. Again, one of the young fellas that did his thing way back when. For those of you who also have that sort of experience but have yet to come and share it with us, please. We want you, we need you, and we'll do all we can to make it helpful. But more important, I appeal to some of the gals, the nurses, the waves, the wax, and so forth, who have done so much for guys like us. Please come and share your stories with us. Bob Stevens again saying thank you. Hope to see you soon. Goodbye.